everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I'm back with another fall video. I'll be sharing 5 new fall DIYs that are super easy to do. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Now let's go ahead and get started. For the first DIY today, I'm going to be creating a wreath, and I'm going to be using this embroidery hoop. This is just the outer ring of the hoop because I already used the inside for another project. I'm also using some fabric. This fabric here is from Hobby Lobby and it just screams fall to me. I love all of these colors together. So I'm going to be cutting all of my fabric in strips. So I just placed 2 pieces of the fabric together so that I could cut out more strips at one time. And then I'm cutting my strips in about 1 inch or so in width. And I just continued to do this until I had a ton of different strips cut out. And I'm also using this pumpkin fabric. This is from Walmart and I think I got it last year or the year before and I've just not used it yet. And it did come in a fat quarter, and I'm doing the same thing here. I'm just cutting this fabric into strips that are about 1 inch or so in width. Then I'm also using this yellow fabric. This one is also from Hobby Lobby. I have tons of scrap fabric because I use so much for all of my projects. So for a rag wreath, it's a great way to use up all of your fabric. This is from Walmart, this leaf fabric here, and it did come in a fat quarter, and I believe I got it last year. Same thing here, just cutting out my fabric into a bunch of different strips. Then once I have all of my strips cut out, I'm going to be tying them around my embroidery hoop in a knot. And then once I have that tied around, I just move the knot up to the top of the hoop. And then I just continued to do that over and over, and I just switched between each fabric. I did this bright yellow fabric, and then I would do the pumpkin fabric after that one. Then after the pumpkin fabric, I would do the lighter checked fabric. And then after that one, I would do my leaf fabric. And I just kept switching that up until I had all of my fabric tied around my entire embroidery hoop. Once my fabric was all tied on, some of the pieces were a little bit longer than the other ones, so I just trimmed the longer ones up. And then it was a time to make my little sign that I'm going to have on the front of my wreath. I'm using one of these wood planks from Dollar Tree, and then I'm painting that plank with my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster. And then to distress it a little bit, I used some of my Java colored paint from Folk Art, and I just really lightly dry brushed that around all of the edges and then a little bit on the front of this piece of wood as well. And then I'm using this Welcome Fall. This came in a pack of wood cutouts from Dollar Tree this year, and I'm painting this one with that same Java colored chalk paint. After the paint was all dry, I used hot glue on the back of my word cutout and attached it to the center of my wood plank. Then it was time to attach my plank to my wreath, so I'm tying 2 pieces of jute together, and I did this twice because I'm going to be doing one on each side, and then I'm hot gluing those on the back top side of my wood plank. I was going to use my staple gun to attach these, but I thought my staples might be a little bit too long, so I ended up just doing the hot glue. And then I placed that in the center of my wreath and tied those jute pieces around my wreath. And here is my Welcome Fall rag wreath all finished. I love all of these colors together. I've really been into all of the different yellow tones for fall this year. Now moving right along into DIY number 2. For this one, I'm using this palette riser from the Target Dollar Spot. I think this was either from last year or the year before, but I'm finally using it. And I'm painting it with my Folk Art paint in the color Vintage Mustard. I only had to do 1 coat of this paint. Then once it was all dry, I wanted to give it a distressed look. So I took my Java colored paint and I dry brushed that on the entire piece. I did the edges and then I ran kind of what was left over on my brush along the front pieces. For this project, I'm also using these Scrabble tiles. I'm spelling out 4 different fall words. I'm doing pumpkins, leaves, hay rides, and cider. You can do any kind of fall words that you like, but I really like these ones. So I just centered all of my tiles on each one of my wood planks, and then I took each tile and hot glued it down. I picked these ones up from Amazon, and I will have them linked down in the description box, but I believe that Dollar General has some of these as well. Next, I'm using this piece of a branch that I got out of my backyard. I just cut it down to the size I want to create my pumpkin stem, and then I hot glued that on the top of my palette. To add some detail to the top of my pumpkin, I'm using a few strips of raffia and tying them around the top branch and just creating a really simple bow. And then I'm just cutting the ends of the raffia off to the length that I want, and then I'm using some hot glue to hold down my bow and just keep it in place. Next, I'm using one of these leaves from this fall stem piece that I got from Dollar Tree. I really love the more orangey color leaves for this particular project, so I just cut one of them off, and then I'm hot gluing that to the very top of my palette right behind my bow. And then I'm also using some of the berry garland, also from Dollar Tree. I'm wrapping it around my finger to give it a little bit of a curly look, and then I'm using some hot glue to attach that on the opposite side of my branch. And this is my palette pumpkin all finished. This could not have been an easier project, and I just love the way that this one turned out. Now moving into DIY number 3. For this one, I'm using this piece that came from Dollar Tree from around Valentine's Day. It's just the perfect size for what I need. So I'm painting that with my Waverly paint in the color Plaster, and I did do 2 coats of this paint. Then I'm going to be using 4 of these square unfinished wood tiles. These I did get in a giant pack from Amazon, and I will have them linked in my description box. And I stained all 4 of them with my Craftsmart wood stain in the color brown, and I just used an old towel to apply the stain. For this project today, I'm also using some of these Scrabble tile stencils that I just recently picked up. I got the full alphabet, but for today's project, since I have 4 tiles, I'm going to be spelling out the word fall, F-A-L-L. So I'm just taking my stencil and I'm lining it up and centering it onto my wood tile, which is pretty much the same size as my stencil. And then I'm using painter's tape on each side of the stencil, and I'm just taping it around the wood piece so that my stencil stays in place and I have nice, crisp, clean lines without it moving around. And I did this for all 4 of the letters. And I did wait for each one of the letters to dry before peeling off my stencil, just to make sure I didn't have any bleeding or anything like that. I'm going to be having all of my letters standing up, but the wood's not very thick, so I need to create a base. For this, I'm hot gluing 2 of the tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree together, and then I'm hot gluing those in the center bottom portion of my wood tile. And this is just gonna help my letter piece stand up without falling over. And again, I just did this 4 different times for each one of my letters. I have all of my tiles spaced out the exact way I want them to be once they're attached. I always like to set everything out before attaching it, just so I don't have any mess ups later on. To attach all of my tiles, I'm just lifting them up, placing hot glue on the bottom of the towering tumbling blocks, and then just placing them back down into place. Here is the fall sign all finished. This is perfect if you're looking for a super easy last minute fall decor idea, and I just really love the way that this looks. Now moving into DIY number 4. For this one, I'm going to be using one of these crates from Dollar Tree, and I'm also using 3 of these small dowel rods also from Dollar Tree. The first thing I'm doing for this project is painting my crate with the Waverly paint in the color Plaster, and then I'm also painting all 3 of the dowel rods with that same plaster color. Once all of the paint has dried, I'm then going to be attaching 2 of the rods on the inner slat of my crate, and to do that I'm just placing hot glue on the inside of the crate and then pressing each rod on top of the glue and just holding that until the glue sets so that it doesn't move around. Then I'm going to be attaching the 3rd rod to the very top of the 2 other rods, and again, to do that, just using a little bit of hot glue. Next, I'm creating a small banner. I took two pieces of jute and tied them together, and this is going to be like the base of the banner. And then I'm using this checked ribbon from Hobby Lobby, and I just tied it in a knot around the two pieces of jute and then pushed it up to the top knot on the jute. And then I'm also going to be using two more pieces of jute. These ones are going to be a little bit smaller in length. And then I'm just tying those around the other two pieces of jute and pressing them up next to the checked ribbon. And I continue just rotating through those two, the jute and the checked ribbon, until I got all the way down to the length of my banner that I'm going to want to have. And then once I got to the end, I just tied a knot on the other two like base pieces of jute. I hope that made sense. And then some of my ribbon and my jute pieces were a little bit too long, so I just trimmed those up a bit. And then I attached my banner to the top of my dowels. I actually did not see that my camera had stopped filming this, but I just used hot glue on each side of the dowel rods to attach the garland. Next, I'm going to be using this little wooden piece. This came in the unfinished wood, like assorted pack that you can get from Dollar Tree. And I'm going to be painting this with that Java colored chalk paint from Folk Art. And then once I have that painted, I let that sit and dry. And I actually created this Farm Fresh Pumpkins little cutout on my Cricut. If you don't have a Cricut, you could always use some stickers. And I just transferred that onto the wooden piece right in the center, and then I hot glued that wood piece on the front of my crate. Then it was time to fill up my crate, so I'm filling mine with some Spanish moss that I picked up from Dollar Tree, and then on top of the Spanish moss, I'm going to be using some of these really cute mini pumpkins that I picked up at Joann Fabrics this year. They did have a few different colors, but I only have these green ones on hand at home, so I just placed them right on top of my Spanish moss. This is what my Farm Fresh Pumpkins little crate looks like. I think it is super cute and it was really easy to create. Now moving into the fifth and final DIY today, I'm going to be making some tiered pumpkins. For this one, I'm using 3 different size pumpkins, a larger, a medium, and a smaller one. 2 of these are from Dollar Tree, and I think one of them might be from Walmart. I first started by removing all of the stems of all 3 of my pumpkins. Then I decided to paint my pumpkins. You can leave them as is. I just wanted mine to be a few different colors. So this larger one that I'm placing on the bottom, I used the vintage mustard color from Folk Art. And then the medium one that you see me have here, I'm painting that with the Folk Art chalk paint in the color Hazy. This hazy color is a little more sheer, so I did have to do 3 different coats of this color on my pumpkin. And then for the smallest pumpkin, I'm painting that with the plaster color from Waverly. Then to add a little bit more of like a realistic look or add some detail to my pumpkins, I took a small paintbrush and I used the hazelnut color from Waverly, and I pretty much just dry brushed this color on all of the grooves of the pumpkin. Some areas I had a little bit more paint on my brush than others, but I think it looks a little bit more real that way, even though they don't really look real. And then for the white pumpkin, I did the same thing. I used that small brush again with the hazelnut color, only this time I ended up adding a second color in all of the grooves of the pumpkin. I used some Java from Folk Art right over top of that hazelnut color, and you can't really see it on camera, but the 2 colors really added a lot of dimension, and I just love the way that that looks. Then for the hazy colored pumpkin, I used that same hazelnut color in all of the grooves, only this time I ended up using the plaster color in all of the grooves over top of the hazelnut color. It just added a lot to my pumpkin. Then it was time to start adding some Spanish moss. You could leave this out if you don't like Spanish moss, but I really love the look of it. So I'm using some hot glue to attach it to the top of my mustard colored pumpkin. And then once that was all attached, I then used hot glue on the bottom of my hazy colored pumpkin and placed that right on top of the bottom pumpkin on the Spanish moss. And then I'm sure you can figure out what's going to happen next. I just placed more Spanish moss on the top of my middle pumpkin and then hot glued that very top smallest pumpkin on that Spanish moss. Then I just placed my stem back in the very top pumpkin, and then I'm using one of these leaves off of this fall stem. I forget where the stem is from, but I've had it in my stash forever, and I just figured this leaf was the perfect size. So I cut that off and then I hot glued it right next to the top stem on my pumpkin. And then I wanted to add some of the berry garland from Dollar Tree, so I just cut a small piece of that off. I curled it up around my finger, and then I added that right next to the leaf on the top of my pumpkin, and again, just used hot glue to attach it. Then for the last step in this project, I used 2 pieces of jute, and then I'm just making a really simple shoelace bow, and then I'm attaching that bow at the very top of my pumpkin in front of my stem. Here are my tiered pumpkins all finished. I've seen these all over in so many different stores. And what's great about this project is you can really customize it to fit with your own home decor. I really hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and share it. If you're not subscribed, I hope that you will consider subscribing, and please be sure to hit the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of my future videos. And please let me know what project from today's video was your favorite. Thank you so much for watching.